So, for those in my audience who aren't familiar with you already, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Adam Conover. I'm a comedian in the United States of America, and I created and host a show called Adam Ruins Everything, which airs on True TV. And I also recently hosted a game show on Nickelodeon called The Crystal Maze.
And what is Adam Ruins Everything?
Adam Ruins Everything is, I call it, I guess, an educational sketch comedy TV show, informational comedy show. We debunk common misconceptions, share incredible truths about the world that most people don't know, tell you the awful side of everything that you take for granted. That's sort of like, I'm going back to like our original log lines now. And I sort of do it in this very vibrant, fast-moving, visual sketch comedy world, as opposed to a lot of other comedians who are doing things in the hybrid informational comedy space where they're sitting behind a desk or standing on a soundstage. I'm out in the world, and specifically, it's all our episodes are done as a sort of Socratic dialogue where I'm talking to another person and having a conversation with them about the issue, and they're sort of standing in as an audience surrogate, asking the questions that most audience members might ask.
Since my episode today is about experts and expertise, I guess the first question to get us going is a simple one, which is, are you, Adam, an expert?
I don't think so, no. I mean, I'm an expert on comedy. I'm an expert on making television. I'm an expert on making educational television and, I would say communication, like, say, science communication or media literacy sometimes I'm asked to speak on, and then I can feel I can speak with actual expertise. The rest of the time on the show, I am, in my view, signal boosting other experts, right? Almost every segment that you see on our show, we are taking an argument that another very smart person has made or a discovery that they have made, and we're sort of, ingesting it, chewing it up, spitting it back out in our own way, right? With our own spin on it, our own sort of spin on the argument, our own jokes. And then we usually, at least 2 times an episode, bring in an expert to literally appear on the show and to put the sort of final button on it and really give us the direct communication with the actual expertise that's out there in the world.
So sometimes you will get experts on the show. How do you choose the experts that you bring on?
Well, we want the person who actually knows, right? That's what I want to bring to the audience is, hey, there is a person out there who has studied this for their entire lives, right? Or for decades or for years. Or they have experienced the thing firsthand is another type of expert that we have on. And we're going to introduce them to you, bring them into your living room so that you really get to meet them. I think that's really, really valuable. So, for instance, we did a segment on immigration, and one of the points we made was that, immigration doesn't work the way that in the United States we normally think of, where you have, people sneaking across the border to steal jobs and that sort of thing. There's a lot of like statistical demographic facts that the average person doesn't understand. For instance, that the rate of immigration is actually at an all-time low is one thing that you would not be able to tell from watching the contemporary political discourse in America. And other things like that, right? So we brought on a professor who has literally been doing field research on immigration since the 70s. He goes down to, the border, the America southern border, and does field research. He interviews people, he takes notes. How long have you been here? Do you know anyone who's crossed the border, etc. Just like straight up demographic research using, peer-reviewed techniques. And he publishes that data. And, the U.S. government uses his data set, right, to draw their own conclusions. And so when this dude comes on and says, immigration is actually at an all-time low, this is the dude who knows. You know what I mean? It's a perspective we don't often get because, he's not particularly, media trained or telegenic or any of those other sorts of things that your average pundit is. He just happens to be the actual dude who's done the research. So we like to bring that sort of person on. We also like to bring on the sort of person who's experienced the subject directly, right? So in our first season, we did a segment on felony disenfranchisement. This is the practice where in many states in America, if you've been convicted of a felony, even after you have served your time, you can no longer vote, right? Which is unfair and discriminatory for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, it's also just, hey, the person has served their time, right? Don't we believe in rehabilitation? Don't we want them to continue to be a citizen, or do we want to like have them like excommunicated from the body politic for the rest of their life, right? And so we're like, we want someone to speak on this. And so we brought on a fellow named Daryl Atkinson, who's a lawyer and activist and was formerly incarcerated. And he said, you know, I was at a young age convicted of a nonviolent drug crime. I did my time. I became a lawyer. I got my law degree. I passed the bar exam, and I now work to help other folks regain their civil rights. And yet I still cannot vote in the state where I was born. And, you know, you listen to his story and you say, okay, well, you can't listen to him tell the story without concluding that's unjust, right? If you're looking at him right in the eyes and he's telling you his story, you're like, yeah, I'm on board with this, right? Because I'm literally interfacing with the person who has experienced it. So yeah, those are the sort of two buckets that we put them in.
It does, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it does seem like most of the time the show takes quite an abstract approach to knowledge. You have like a bird's eye view of the facts. So you will occasionally get people on who've directly experienced it, but it seems that most of the time you get experts on who have been like doing the research at a more abstracted level. Is that fair to say?
That's an interesting way to put it. I mean, I haven't done the numbers of which of those two types, right, we have more of. We certainly, look, all of our segments are 5 to 7 minutes long, right? So we're trying to pack a compelling idea in, convey it to you accurately, tell you why it's interesting, and give you some deeper knowledge about the subject in a very short amount of time, right? And so we are really distilling down these arguments or these observations into really, really small parts. I think for that reason, it does seem a bit abstracted at times. But yeah, as far as what buckets the experts fall into, I have to say it's a lot of both.
I suppose the advantage of having that more abstracted approach is that it allows you to formulate problems very, very precisely. Because this is the particular question that this issue hinges on, and we can look at the data either way. As opposed to like if you just like only sat down and interviewed people who've been directly experienced by it, I imagine their experience would go to all sorts of interesting places that might not necessarily have that focus.
Yeah, we are often looking for someone who has a particular critique, right? A particular, a lot of times we call it framing, right? A way of looking at the issue and describing the issue that is vivid and compelling and fresh and is an argument that other people are not making, right? And so often we do try to get that person on the show, right? So a good example of that is we did a segment on broadband and, broadband monopolies in the United States, which really restrict Americans access to the internet. It means we have slower internet than other countries. It's really pernicious stuff. And we had on for that segment Susan Crawford, who's a professor at Harvard and worked in communications during the Obama administration. And there's a lot of people who have a good view and understanding of telecommunications, right? But she's someone who has spoken about the issue very vividly in ways that are like really catchy and interesting. She has interesting things to say about it. So she's a person who we brought on because we really loved her framing, and we sort of wanted to absorb some of the way that she looks at the issue in addition to her actual expertise on it. Another person like that, for instance, we had an episode called Adam Ruins Nature, where we, were asking questions like, what is nature? Does nature still exist when we've transformed every corner of the planet so radically? And we had on a wonderful science writer named Emma Maris to help us sort of come to a conclusion at the end. And, she's she has expertise in science, right? She's a science writer, science journalist. But, it's not like she's like the, president of the American Conservancy Sciences Association or whatever. She's a science writer. But what she does have is a really compelling point of view and an argument to make about what nature means in our current Anthropocene age, right? And, you know, I had seen her speak and I had read her pieces and I said, wow, this person's point of view is really fresh and it really helps me understand the issue better. And that's why I want to take what she says and bring it to our audience.
So that's so fascinating to me, because that means that there's an element of who gets to be an expert that isn't knowledge-based, that's not, as philosophers would say, epistemic, because you are looking for people who have this fresh take and who do say things in moving and provocative and I suppose like telegenic ways. And that's so fascinating that there's this extra dimension of expertise.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and it is one that we grapple with because, you know, Douglas Massey, the professor who studied immigration, extremely, I'll just say he's non-telegenic. I don't think he would argue with me. I hope he doesn't feel offended if I say that. He's not a guy who has made his career or has tried to make his career on being a communicator, right? On being on television. He's the guy who does the original research. And that is why we wanted him on there for that segment. He was perfect for that segment, right? But about a year and a half ago, we had on Scott Galloway, who's an NYU business school professor, to talk about why big tech should be broken up, right? And he is an expert because he's a business school professor who studies tech firms and he's written books about them, right? He also happens to be amazing on camera, right? And I saw him a talk that he gave that like blew me away. I was like, wow, this guy, I'm literally like taking performance notes from this guy going like, man, how does he pack so many like fascinating points into such a short period of time, right? Like when you listen to the guy talk, it's like pop, 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 just little revelations go off in your head as he's talking. He's amazing. And since doing our show, he's gotten his own show on Vice, on Viceland, on their television channel, where he does like a half hour a week. He has like a very successful podcast. He's like, you know, he's gone up in the last year and a half as people have become more and more critical of the tech industry. And, you know, so there was that component of let's get this guy on because he's so good on TV, right? There's the good on TV component. And look, I'm on television. I'm a communicator. I can't ignore that part of it, right? I can't just never have those people on. But it's true that television has a bias towards people who are good communicators. And those people aren't necessarily experts. They don't necessarily know more because I know from experience, communication, being good on TV is a skill that you have to practice at, right? I would know more about immigration or about tech firms if I had gone to school for those things instead of doing open mic stand-up comedy for 10 years, right? But that's what I did, and because I did that, I am now good at communicating and I can be on TV where other people can't, right? So it is an interesting question that you raise.
Well, yeah, I mean, I note, I'll cut this out, but I note the similarities because like you have brilliant scientist parents and like very academic siblings, and you went and studied philosophy and you found that you enjoyed performing and comedy a lot more, and you did that for a while, and then you created a hit show on YouTube, and then you started like a TV and like acting career. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean about like having those presenting skills. Does affect like who gets to be seen as the expert or as the presenter or whatever.
Well, I also want to point out you and don't feel the need to cut that out. I think it's fine to talk about that. I also want to point out that like, you know, yeah, I was a philosophy major and I did want to go to grad school, and one of the professors who I really admired at my college, I realized about halfway through that he was very smart, of course, but I also realized he was very charismatic. Yeah. Like just his classes were very exciting, and he, you know, played the part of the professor really well. Like he was both, you know, he's sort of dapper, but also a little bit tweedy, but charming, right? And I realized that every time I talked to him, he would give me the feeling of really listening to me and really caring about my thoughts. You know, like I'm saying like dumbass, like sophomore philosophy major, like thoughts about here's what I think about Cant. And he's like, oh yeah, good point. You know? And I'm like, oh my God, like we're really like doing it together. Right. But then around like my senior year, I started to realize how much of that was an act is too negative a way to put it, but it was a performance, right? It was
truth in different circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was part of what made him a good professor. But I realized it actually didn't make him, we had to do a senior thesis at my school, And I ended up saying, I don't want him to do my senior thesis because it's a little bit too much of a performance, right? And I instead had my advisor be a newer professor who, actually gave me more of her like intellectual time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it was, there's a degree to which even in the world of academia, right, that idea of being a good performer or being witty and being quick on your feet, like really does bring attention to you, right?
So speaking of performance and attention, why the suits? Because the character that you play on Adam Ruins Everything has these, I think, amazing, like incredible suits. Like the look that you go for is very, very like unique and really stands out to me.
Thank you.
So how did you arrive at this, or was that just your taste? Like,
well, it's interesting. A lot of the suit thing came from me trying to build credibility at the beginning, right? When I was on College Humor and we did the first videos, I was like, well, I'm relaying information.
Yeah.
And I was actually playing the whole premise of the series was that it's a little bit of a parody of informative television hosts, right? That I'm a television host who's irritating, right? And so television hosts wear suits, so I'll wear a suit, right?
Yeah.
And that both builds my credibility as, okay, like a suit is the uniform of a person on television who is telling you something that's true, right? And so by putting on a suit, I gain some of that credibility. I put that armor on, right? But then when we did the television show, if you watch the original YouTube series, you'll see I wear an actual suit, right? When we did the television show, we switched to me wearing what are not technically suits. They're like blazer pants combinations, right? It's like, it's not a suit if they don't match, right?
Yeah.
It's a mismatched blazer and pants with a tie and a shirt. And part of that was...
Not to mention some very fabulous pocket squares.
Oh, thank you. And a lot of pocket squares. Yeah, absolutely. And part of that was because I was like learning a lot about menswear and just sort of diving into, I was reading like, Jesse Thorne's blog, Put This On, which is a blog about menswear. And that sort of like traditional tweedy menswear was like very kind of in at that time in like 2015, or at least in on a certain segment of the internet, I suppose. But I also felt that it fit the character version of myself I was playing, which is, that Adam Conover is a little dorkier, a little nerdier. And, the way I dressed was like a little bit too much. Like, I don't really dress like that I don't dress quite like that in real life, right? It's like a little bit too perfect. It's a little bit too much of like, oh, you're a little well-dressed man, aren't you? You like looked in, you really did all your buttons just right, and the patterns are like a little bit clashy and like they're a little bit colorful in a way that's, maybe slightly off. And so a lot of that was, it was about 50-50 trying to sort of steal some of that authority that, besuited men on television have, and trying to create a character where I'm a little bit, he just dresses a little bit too much,
But in an interesting way, it undercuts or subverts the sort of uniform of the TV expert and kind of draws people in, I think, because it almost invites the character you play, as you say, is this like irritating presenter, and he invites mockery and challenge, but at the same time, like, is also informative. So you're kind of you're it's like a parasocial effect, really, I suppose. You're like inviting people to be friendly to you.
Absolutely. And that is part of what makes the show work. That idea of my character, myself on the show, is constantly moving up and down in status. In comedy, there's a concept of high status or low status, right? In a scene, who's high status and who's low status. And what my character does is constantly switch between high status and low status, right? Sometimes he's saying, no, you're wrong about this. Like, you need to know the thing. Your choices are destroying the world, right? And I'm telling the other character in the scene that, and I'm telling the audience that, and I'm doing that very firmly, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that I believe.
Yeah.
And that's me on my high horse. I am high status. And other times, my character is making mistakes, right? Is fucking up, is making... one thing we used to say in our writer's room is that he's always... my character on the show is always factually correct, but socially incorrect.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's doing something that is wrong from, like, yes, you're right to say that, but don't say it at a wedding.
Yeah.
What's the matter with you, right? And so what he does is, it's called status switching, constantly moves between high status and low status. And my writer, Eliza Skinner, I shouldn't call her my writer, she's my friend, and also wrote for my show for the first year, put this so well, and I've never forgotten it. She said, the reason that works is because that's what your relationship is like with a friend, right? With a friend, it's not like one of you is always high status and one is low status like you are with a boss or a teacher, right? With a friend, you're constantly switching. You show up late, you're low status, they make fun of you a little bit. They ask if they can borrow $10, they're low status, right? Or whatever. You make fun of them. You go back and forth, and that's what gives you that friend relationship. And by going up and down like that, that puts me in a friend relationship with the audience, which is, as you say, a parasocial effect.
So changing tack slightly, going back to some stuff we were talking about before, have you ever been surprised by what an expert has told you, one of the experts you've had on, or had to rewrite something because of what they've said?
We have had to rewrite things because the expert gave us a new point of view on the topic. We actually, in our third or fourth year, started scheduling our expert outreaches earlier in our writing process because we were having this thing happen where we would write, we would do the research, we would write our segment, which involves a lot of outlining, a lot of revision, and then we would call an expert who we would, consult and say, hey, we'd like you to be on the show, and here's the script. And they would often say to us, oh, well, this is good, you're not wrong, but the real story is this. And we go, oh, you're right. Oh, that's so much better than what we have. And then we would rewrite to accommodate that, right? And that's always going to happen sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't happen, right? Not every expert tells you that, and you need to have done the prior work. But it happened often enough that we started saying, let's start going to those experts sooner so that we can get the direct transmission from them a little bit quicker. And we also started looking more for experts who we could borrow their argument ahead of time, right? Who had they've written an article, and this is like exactly how we want to do the facts, right? This is this is a really nice argument layout. So let's sort of use that as a template, then do our own research and add to it ourselves. But we know that when they come on, this is the thing that they're going to say, and that's going to be really good.
Are there any topics that you have wanted to cover, but that for one reason or another you can't, or you haven't been able to?
There are a couple examples of that. What I always say is, we're not prohibited from doing anything. There's just different levels of difficulty, right, to doing topics. So I used to say in the first year, I said, we're never going to do Adam Ruins Guns. That's how I felt, because the topic is so divisive in American society. It's one of the fault lines of American society. And as soon as I say, I want to do Adam, as soon as I say, welcome to this episode, it's called Adam Ruins Guns, everybody folds their arms and they say, oh, well, you better say what I want you to say, or I'm going to change the channel, right? Because they know what they think so much. But then by the time we got to last year, I said, well, we've been doing this long enough. I think we can actually do it. I think we can write this in a way that will open people's minds, right? And we dramatized it by having one person I'm talking to who's anti-gun, one person I'm talking to who's pro-gun, and I show up and I say, both of you are wrong. Both of you have things to learn, and here are arguments that are completely outside of the conversation that you've been having, right? And that worked pretty well. We still got plenty of people who did exactly what I said, right, and folded their arms and changed the channel, but we also had a lot of people saying, I watched this with my, pro-gun parent, or, and we both found a lot of things to like, or I found people saying, I don't agree with a lot of what you say, but, you gave me a lot to think about, which is what we were going for. But there's other times where we've done topics that are approaching that level of seriousness, and you just have to find the right way to write it. We've done topics on racism and abuse and violence and death and disease and topics that are extremely upsetting. That you might say, well, how could you do comedy about that? But you just have to write the right kind of joke, and you have to take it seriously when it's necessary, and inject the levity at the right time, etc.
So that's interesting. Do you see the show primarily as comedy?
Good question. Yes, I do see it as comedy. I mean, our joke per minute ratio is lower than your average episode of 30 Rock, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times on the show where I don't make the point with comedy. I make it with serious language, and I look straight at the camera and I say, this is a big fucking deal and we got to take it seriously. And then I make a joke to cut it at the end, I mean, I am a comedian. I do comedy. But I don't consider myself to just be doing comedy, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the old Jon Stewart line of like, nah, I just tell jokes after the puppet's making prank phone calls. Don't take me seriously, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of a cop-out. He was doing more than that, and he knew it. We have a real responsibility to the facts, and the main thing that we're doing is try to deliver this payload of shocking, surprising, revelatory information that makes you see differently about the world, right? Now, that kind of information, I think it is best delivered with comedy, right? Like, I think comedy makes that sort of information jump off the screen, makes you remember it, makes it go down easily, etc., right? But its main purpose isn't just to be funny. Its main purpose is to teach you something and change the way that you think about the world. And the result is that when we're making the show, the comedy is actually the easy part, right? Like, we spend so much more time on the factual parts of the script, on the argument, on the experts, on getting it all right, because after you've laid that out, well, now let's just write some jokes off of it, right? Now let's make it funny. And that's not trivial. It took me 10 years of practice and training to get good enough at writing comedy to be able to do that. But that becomes the part that how to do more easily, and the wrestling with the argument is the difficult thing that you need to get right first.
Have you received any backlash to the show? I'm guessing that you have.
Oh, of course. What the show does is we uproot entrenched narratives and replace them with truer narratives, right? And so, of course, there are people who are so wedded to the old narrative that they fight back, right? And they, you can just go, you'll find, any dozens of, response videos made by, people on YouTube who just, hit play, then they hit pause and go, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay, Adam, clearly we all know. And then they spout off some statistic.
Are they all called X ruins, Adam ruins everything? They're all called that.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. And by the way, I did a funny voice. A lot of them are good faith and are good, right? And are good videos. And we have done 2 segments on the show where we have corrected past mistakes and we've added nuance to past segments, right? We have a really open process with regard to that type of thing. And I'll say that most people love it when an entrenched narrative is uprooted. They love the whole thing of this thing you always believed is not true. They're like, oh my God, really? Tell me more.
They
want to know,
You're
right?
learning
Because
something.
yeah, they're learning something, and it's fun to learn, and most people are open-minded and positive and like to learn things. But yeah, there are people who are just their identity is, we talked about this on the show. It's called identity protective cognition, right? And when a piece of information threatens what you perceive as being your identity, you fight back really hard against it, almost instinctively, right? The best example I ever heard of this, Ezra Klein wrote about this in his book, that if you're Sean Hannity, right, you are not going to be able to accept that climate change is real because your entire identity and your social relations and your job, right, is based on climate change is not real, right? So you are not able to listen to the facts. And so if you're in that position, you're always going to have that backlash. You're always going to fight back. Most people are not in that position, though. But yeah, that does happen.
I imagine it would take so much to shift somebody out of that because you're having to give them a different identity, basically. It must take so much to get through to someone in that way.
Well, I think you have to give them a new identity is a really good way to put it.
But that's quite a scary thing to do, or to try and do. It's give someone a new identity. That's
it's scarier for the person to try to get a new identity, right? If they've built their life on something, the example I always use is we did a segment on why alpha males don't exist, right? Which was just me. I was like, this is the biggest gimme that we've done on the show. This is some weird pop psychology that's infested the internet. The idea that humans are dividable into alpha males and beta males. They have particular traits. There's these types of people. Women are more attracted to alpha males, all this stuff. And it's not science, right? Right? It's like it does not exist. And we talk about the concept of alpha males and beta males doesn't even exist in animals, which is where it's drawn from. It certainly doesn't exist in humans. Go ask any sociologist. They're not going to tell you, yes, humans are divided into alpha males and beta males, right? But it's just not true. Like in the same episode, we almost did a segment on astrology, on how astrological signs aren't real. And we were like, that's too silly, right?
Yeah.
Because most people know that like Pisces isn't like a different type of person. It's just for fun, right? But like that's what alpha males and beta males is. It's about at that level of rigor, Now that doesn't mean it hasn't helped people, right? I'm sure there's lots of people who have improved their lives because they were like, they absorbed this philosophy and they were like, I need to start acting. I need to stand up straight, and work out a little bit, right? And they feel a little bit better now about their lives, right? Because of this.
I suppose equally there'll be a lot of people it's like ruined their life because they've been chasing this thing that's like you can never really get to, and that
absolutely they're denigrating themselves, right? They're saying, oh, I'm a beta, but no, I need to act like an alpha. Oh, you're a beta. No, I'm not like you. I'm a alpha.
And like, if you read Reddit relationships posts, there's like full of guys who've just like ruined their what sounds like very happy relationships by like trying to be more alpha, and like I laugh, but like it's also quite sad.
Yeah, no, it is. But like I'd never denigrate somebody who has used that kind of thinking to improve their lives by contrast. The same way that like I don't go around talking shit about astrology because like a lot of people just I don't know, that it's like a form of very loose therapy, right? Where they think about who they are and what their path is, and it's like it's fine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But some folks have their identity so rooted in this alpha beta thing that they like lash out and panic when it's questioned, even though it again is complete nonsense. It's based in nothing, So yeah, that the key thing to do is to give those folks a new narrative, right? When we had a expert on talk about the backfire effect, he came on and talked about how the backfire effect is when you're presented with new information, you lash out against it, right? And come back against it even harder. One of the things he said is that narratives are powerful. You need to replace an old narrative with a new narrative that's even better, right? And when he said that on the air on our show, I was like, oh, that's like what our show actually does, because we are providing folks with like, a more like you've been told that the engagement ring is, this age-old tradition. But what's even more interesting than that? It was invented in the 30s by the De Beers Corporation to sell more diamonds. That story is better than the old story. Also has the advantage of being true, right? So it's more interesting. Like it's more interesting that some old prince did it 1,000 years ago and now we're all following the same pattern. Okay, sure, not much of a story. A shadowy cabal of diamond miners like hired an advertising firm to inject a new tradition into society via advertising, and we all believed it and then forgot it was an ad campaign, and now we just believe that it's a tradition that like we independently came up with 1,000 years ago. That's an incredible story, right? I could talk. That's the first Adam Ruins Everything ever.
Yeah,
I'm still boggling my own mind just telling you about it today. It's a fucking nuts story. That's why it's better. So in the same way, folks who really have that as part of their identity, they need to craft a new identity, right? And that's hard. Like I don't know how to provide that to someone in 7 minutes, and so that's where I'm trying to improve what I do.
Mm-hmm. When you do get backlash, is it more directed against the factual content of the show? Is it people saying you are factually wrong? Or is it more directed at you? Or
I'd say like 30-70.
Which way?
30-70 facts versus me personally,
So it's 70% just like abuse.
Yeah, this guy's got a punchable face. I'm like, yeah, that's the point of the character. Yeah. It's a funny character where I'm behaving in a fake, smug, and nerdy way in order to do comedy about how I'm annoying people. People are like, oh, this guy's annoying. Yeah, that's the character. Urkel was annoying too. That was the point, But yeah, that sort of thing. I get called a cuck. That's fine. That's but
badge of honor.
yeah, with the factual information, people love to, for instance, find, we publish all of our sources, right? So people can go through and like read where we got the information from. And there have been times where, we published at this point thousands of sources, and, a couple dozen of them are like less good than others, right? And so people will go pick out that one and say, oh, look at this. Like one thing that people say would be like, oh, they cited a Vox article, so therefore what they're saying is wrong. And in our first year, we did cite a couple Vox articles because their process is, I think, pretty good, right? In future years, we, sort of bolstered our citations process, and we would say, well, let's go find the original study that the Vox article is citing, because Vox is ultimately an aggregator the same as we are, right? We're repeating information. So let's go to the original source of wherever that journalist got their information, right? So that's an improvement that we made. But people will like to go through and find like one small error and use that as a reason to disregard the entire argument, right? Which is, also, I regret whenever we have an error. And again, we've had segments where we correct errors, but it's also not how knowledge formation works, right? Like a single citation mistake does not invalidate an entire argument, right? When an argument against one of our segments is made in good faith and is, complex and nuanced and has detail to it, those are the ones that we really address, right? And we either address those on the show. I've addressed them, we've written op-eds, or, I've written blog posts, or even just like Twitter threads on occasion, depending on the, severity of the error that we made. But I think the important thing is that we engage with that as a good faith effort, right? If someone is bringing a good faith critique to us, we engage with it, and that builds our credibility with the audience, right? One of our head of research last year, Natalie Scher, had a really good way of putting this, which is that, it's not about accuracy and objectivity like 100% of the time. It's about credibility, right? It's about when you show people that you've got a responsible process that takes good faith concerns seriously and makes adjustments, right, and is accountable, then that builds credibility with the audience. And so that's what I seek to do.
Oh, that's very interesting, because that is not necessarily aligned with, and even in some cases could be opposed to, the goal of being accurate.
Well, what you need to understand is it's not possible to be perfectly accurate, right? As you're a human being, I'm a human being, you're a human being, right? You strive for accuracy, right? That is our goal. We fact check our scripts. We fact check them multiple times. We run them by experts, right? The scripts are read by experts. We have a research, every script has a researcher who follows it from beginning to end, dives into all the literature, fact checks it, consults with the expert, right? We have multiple fact check meetings, etc. Even, when you do that, hey, sometimes errors slip through because that is humanity, right? That's the process. And so the more important thing is, what do you do when that happens, right? Do you issue a correction? Do you make an adjustment to your process? And that's what we do. And so that is my point. Not that accuracy is not important. It is. But if we were to argue that our process is so good, we are never inaccurate, right? That would be a false claim. If someone claims that, like, walk away from them and stop listening to them, right? If someone says, hey, mistakes happen, here's how we handle that in a transparent, accountable way, as we try to do on our show, that is how I think you build trust with an audience.
So in addition to owning up to and correcting mistakes, what other techniques do you use to build credibility with an audience?
Good question. One is that one of the very earliest things we did, I think I started doing this in the second or third video that we put on YouTube before the television show, is that we put our citations on screen, right? Because that came from me saying, hey, I'm just a fucking comedian, right? I am doing the research, which at the beginning was me like literally by myself reading articles and studies and converting them into information, right? converting them into scripts.
Yep. And I know that.
Yeah, you've done that many times yourself, right? I was like, well, why should anybody believe me? Right? I'm just like some 30-year-old guy in LA. And so I started putting the citations in specifically to show people, hey, I did the work, right? Like, here it is, flick, there it is down up in the corner. You can go look it up yourself, right? And I think that's really important. And I'm kind of surprised that more shows haven't picked up on doing that same process, because it's like just such a nice little, way to build that credibility with the audience as they're watching. There's a little citation in the corner, and they can go look it up if they want. We publish all the sources online as well.
This is something that I live in fear of, though, because I also do that. I also put my sources in the top right. But what I kind of live in fear of is that people don't go and check them. Or the most people won't. Oh, yeah. The people will see that and go, oh, this person's credible, and they'll like listen more, and it helps my credibility, but doesn't actually help with the learning. Like that's what I kind of live in fear of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is coming back to the performative nature of it.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely, that's what's happening. The little click goes by. Like on our show, it's a little drop down, and there's a little click sound, right? And we position that so that after I say something, you hear the sound, and you're conditioned to think, oh, well, there's a
Pavlov. That's so sneaky.
Right? Well, it's not sneaky. It's just good TV making.
I know,
right?
no. Well, but I'm saying sneaky in a good way. Like,
yeah, and specifically when I say something that is like a very surprising fact, something that's a little hard to believe, right? We pay a lot of attention to where that little sound comes in, because we want to like make sure that we're cueing you and making you, reminding you that we did the research here, right? But of course, a vanishingly small number of people are going online to our sources page to actually look at the source.
They're
right?
all
Probably
alpha
more
males,
people are doing it for you, because you're on the internet, right? So people can watch and like do it as they're watching your video. They can click the link.
I hope they wouldn't.
Whatever.
I put a lot of work into my visuals. If you're watching this video right now in the background while you're doing something else, stop, pay attention. I put so much work into the costume this month. You should probably watch it.
Well, like for my show, we're on cable. We're also on YouTube, but we're on cable, and so people would have to like hit pause on their DVR and like pull out the laptop. And so yeah, sure, not many people are doing that. And then a lot of people who are looking at the sources, maybe they're just trying to do a cheap shot, right? And they're trying to say, oh, he cited the New York Times. We all know that's a biased rag, right? Or whatever. Yeah. Or they go to find one little methodological error or something like that, rather than really engage with, the totality of the sources that we have brought to bear, right? But there are people who, I get messages from folks saying, hey, Adam, I used your video as the beginning place for, a college essay on this, right? And your citation list was helpful, right? Mm-hmm. Your bibliography was helpful because it let me know where to go find the sources, right? And it lets me say to people, hey, don't cite me, right? Cite the people who I cite, right? Cite the researchers, cite the journalists. And that really does work. I mean, there are people out there who are able to use our citations to continue their own process of knowledge formation and knowledge creation.
So have you ever had feedback from people saying that you've changed their minds about stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, our show is a little bit of a mind-changing machine. That's sort of the goal. And as we've done harder and harder topics, I have to say, I'm not positive. I think we probably changed more people's minds about engagement rings than about guns, right? Yeah. Because I think people are still more hardened about guns. But yeah, I mean, I've had people come up to me and say, yeah, we didn't get an engagement ring because of you. Instead, we took a vacation. I'm like, wonderful. That's great.
Nice.
We did a segment on circumcision and had plenty of people come up to me and say, hey, Adam, we didn't circumcise our baby because of your video. And I'm like, that's a very powerful influence to have on people's lives. They've got a part of their body that they might not have had otherwise, And again, by the way, the point of this segment is like, it's okay to be circumcised but there isn't a particular reason to do it. So you could just not, right? It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's the history of why it's so widely practiced in the United States is very silly. So yeah, we have changed people's minds in that way, and I hope more broadly that we, what we want the show to do is encourage people to think more critically about the world around them, right? And to have those questions themselves, and to sort of absorb our process and apply it in their own lives, right? This process of careful, rational, empathetic inquiry.
I suppose I'm wondering, like, what is the limit of that? Because there are some... this came to me today. I was thinking, like, would there ever be like an Adam Ruins QAnon? Because I read an amazing article about that in The Atlantic today. And what strikes me about that and about conspiracy theories and all sorts of like really big misconceptions people have is it's not so much based on factual claims, but it's more like a vibe. And like, how do you present somebody out of something that is like, that isn't really decided on the facts, that is just like entirely vibes based, which so many really big topics seem to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could not put us in front of like a QAnon supporter, right? And I could not fact them out of that.
No.
Right? It's not possible. They've built up too much of an edifice. And we did an episode on conspiracy theories, where we talked about, for instance, how the moon landing could not have been faked, right? It actually would have been harder to fake the moon landing than it would have been to go to the moon because of the film technology that didn't exist on the time. We have a forensic film expert on the show to explain why that is. It would not have been possible to light the scene in this possible way. The slow motion would not have worked, etc. And we did that because I think that's a fascinating and really fun argument.
Yeah.
I don't think that argument convinced a lot of people who don't believe that we landed on the moon, right? I think it gave a lot of people who were like me, found the argument interesting, a lot to think about, right? And it was really cool. But the thing about conspiracy theories is that they tap into a human bias for pattern seeking, right? And to make sense of the world in a way that is deeply emotional. And that can't be debunked so easily. And it's very dangerous, right? When you have people take advantage of that. And so I don't think my method for correcting misinformation is useful for stopping conspiracy theories, right? I don't think if we had 10,000 Adam Ruins Everything type shows on the air that we would end, QAnon. We might make a little bit of progress on like vaccine denialism, right? Because we'd get all the folks who like, we'd inform a lot of folks about vaccines, right? But I don't think we'd like convert Jenny McCarthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what we need is better systems in our informational ecosystem overall that promote more healthy information and good information and that don't spread conspiratorial information, right? We need less... what we know is that, social media algorithms, for instance, drive people to this information and make it profitable, right? YouTube is profiting in such a direct way from conspiracies and because they're running ads on the shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're literally running ads on it. They're driving people to it. And that's the problem, right? And that's what needs to be corrected in order to fight that problem. But yeah, no, it's true that like some facts are, the way I put it is that on Adam Ruins Everything, we try to do justice to people's emotional truth. That's what the person I'm talking to, that's what their purpose is, right? Is they say, well, okay, Adam, that might be true, but here's how I feel about that, right? And that's really important because the audience, if they feel the same way, then it's going to be echoed for them, right? They're going to say, okay, this show understands how I feel, and they're responding to it, right? But, something like QAnon is all emotional truth, right? There's no debunk you can do to it. And the emotional truth is so powerful and so pernicious for the person that it's very, very hard to fight back against. And so for that reason, it's a little bit outside of our realm. I can help other people understand conspiracy theories, right? And how to speak to someone who's in the thrall of conspiracy theories. But... I can't show up and go, there isn't actually a cabal of, blood drinking child eaters out there.
Yeah, that's
you know,
a very
like
old
it's not gonna
one.
work.
Yeah.
For the same reason, you know, people sometimes, a lot of people used to ask me, "Hey, Adam, when are you going to ruin religion?" Right? This is related, not the same, but people say, "Adam, when are you going to ruin religion and prove why religions aren't real?" Right? And look, I count myself an atheist, but I'm not going to do that episode because my belief is that for most people, religion doesn't actually have a factual component. You know, it is not really a factual belief about the universe. You know, there's no guy up there with a white beard sitting on a cloud. Yeah, religious people don't think that either. You know, what religion is, and again, this is just my personal view, is like it's more of like an emotional orientation of your answer to the question of what does it fucking mean to be conscious. Right? It's a different sort of mental thing than a factual claim about the world, and therefore my method doesn't really interface with it.
I mean, it's the same reason I also won't really touch the topic. I don't do a lot of philosophy on religion on my show for that exact same reason, because it's just kind of like, not only is it played out, but it doesn't ever seem to really help all that much. Yeah. I think you've pretty much like prefigured the answers like most of the rest of my questions. To be honest, like you got it.
I tend to speak in large.
No, you got it. Like
chunks.
you got them all. It was fantastic. Yeah. I mean, what I find really interesting about Adam Marin's Everything, and why I specifically what I find really interesting about Adam Marin's Everything, and specifically why I asked you on, is the character that you play is less like an expert who's just informing people. Like you touched on this at the start. Like you're not just a guy in a suit behind a desk. No disrespect to my countryman John Oliver, but his style is, you know, he gives you the facts. Like, here is what it is. Here are the jokes.
Yeah.
Here are facts, jokes. You
and
even
he's
mentioned
excellent at it.
What's that?
He's excellent at it.
Yeah, he's very good at it. Yeah. Well, you mentioned at the start that what your show does is more like a Socratic dialogue. It is much more like a philosopher. The character you play is not somebody who's like a traditional expert, but more of a gadfly, less somebody who informs and more somebody who just like deliberately complicates things, which is like an approach that I find like really very interesting as like a basis for launching information and expertise. Yeah. I think that's cool.
I've tried to, you know, when we started, my character was an extreme caricature, right? I was very much like, here's the facts and I'm going to tell them, and it's annoying, right? The more we did the show, the more I wanted to build in my actual process, right? Which is like, hey, I'm a comedian. I'm very curious about the world. I have a lot of questions. I'm trying to figure shit out. Come figure it out with me, right? And so we started having more and more segments where my character's actually at a loss and has to learn something from somebody else, right? Or moments where my character is proven wrong, or, you know, moments where my character learns something over the course of the episode, has his own mind changed, right? Because that's my own experience in life. Like in real life, me making the show is me trying to learn things, right?
Yeah.
Like I very quickly ran out of, in the first season, it was like, hey, here's all the shit that I've learned over the last 10 years. I read this book and I read that article and I spoke to that expert and I've wanted to say this for a long time. I've wanted to tell the story about the truth about circumcision. Here it is, right? Then after that, I sort of ran out of everything that I knew a lot about, right? And it was more like, okay, I'm curious about this, right? I'm curious about why, why the hell is it so hard to, you know, I'm curious about the backfire effect, right? I'm curious about conspiracy theories. I'm curious about nature. I'm wrestling with the question of what does the natural world mean when we've transformed the world so much, right? That episode I'm so proud of, because that was one that I went into saying, hey guys, went to my writer's room. I'm really fucked up about this. You know, I grew up with the idea that like nature and man are separate, and that there's a natural world out there and we need to protect it. But the more I learn, the more I realize that we've affected every single ecosystem on the planet, and there is no such thing as pristine nature. And so let's say that, but then what the hell does that mean, right? What does this mean to us? And so through researching it, we found stories that helped us shed light, both on my original point that I knew I wanted to say, but also that helped me answer the question for myself. And when we had Emma Maris on, she like gave me the final, answer to the question I had been seeking, right? So when you're watching that episode, you're seeing more of a process of discovery. And that's what we've been trying to build into the show more and more over time is you're watching me wrestle with these issues in real time. And in my work going forward, that's what I'm really trying to focus on even more. And that's really important to me because I don't fundamentally consider myself to be like smarter than other people. I'm more fortunate than many other people. I'm fortunate enough and privileged enough to have had a really excellent education. That has, brought me to my way of thinking about some things. But apart from that, I'm just like a curious fucking person trying to learn more about the world. And I want the audience to be my companion in that. I want us to go on that journey together. And that is ultimately how I want to be seen. And it's funny because the original format, Adam Ruins Everything, is a little bit at odds with that. And I've been trying to make that adjustment, right, over time in order to shift it in that way. If you see me live, when it was still possible for me to do live stand-up, that was very much what it was about, was me and the audience going on a journey together.
Adam is ruined by everything.
Yeah, I really am. But yeah, I mean, that is who I want to be for the audience. I'm not, I'm not some fucking guy in a suit, right, anymore, like sitting behind a desk telling you this is how it is. I'm someone who's engaged in a process of inquiry and curiosity. And I hope that the audience feels that same way and wants to go on that journey with me and wants to have that sort of even friendly relationship with me. That's what I'm sort of craving is to build like a community of folks who want to proceed with that inquiry together and want to ask questions in this open, empathetic, curious way.
Well, I think I've got just the community for you, Adam.
I
think they're underneath this video right now.
All right. Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. I don't know, watch my show or whatever. Maybe I got to start posting shit on YouTube.
No, hang on a minute. This is my turf. Get out of here.
Oh, YouTube. Let me tell you, YouTube's a terrible business. So
I know.
Wow, a media company where they get all the content for free and shave you off a little bit of ad dollars if they feel like it. That's a great business model.
Yeah. Well, that's why there's patreon.com/philosophy. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go support the guy.
Thank you very much. Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show. Yeah, it means a huge amount to me, like as a fellow creator and as a fan of your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. As a fan of your work, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
Okay, brilliant. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to stop
No
recording.
problem.